Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to have a look at a beer from another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. So this brewery is a little bit unique. This is the first Belgian style brewery that I've come across in all of the Swedish beers that I've reviewed, so I have to say I am very curious about this one. So for this review then we are going to head a bit north of me here in Lund in Skåne in the south of the country, and we're going to go to a little place called Ljungsbro, which is to the north of Linköping, and we're going to have a look at my first beer from the Vreta Kloster Nanobryggeri, or if you want to translate it into English, the Vreta Monastic Nanobryggeri. So this particular beer is called St. Helena. It comes in at 8.8% ABV, and this beer, according to Untappd, is a dark, strong Belgian ale. So yeah, I guess it might have a little bit of kind of double and quadruple quality to it. I'm not sure exactly what to expect of it in the flavour profile, but I'm sure we can kind of decide a little bit more what style it's like when we actually taste the thing. But yeah, very curious to see how this one turns out. Always nice to introduce the very small Swedish breweries to you here on the channel, and hopefully this turns out to be another one of these kind of hidden gems actually. As I said, the very first brewery that I've come across that seem to be dedicated to brewing Belgian style beers here in Sweden. So this beer was released as part of the Lokal Småskaligt assortment. I think I got this one. This one was either released in October or November. I honestly can't remember when I bought this one. It has been sitting in the fridge for at least 1 month at the moment. But yeah, I'm curious to see, as I say, how it turns out. But as I've told you in previous reviews, you can really find some gems amongst these very small Swedish breweries. We've got about 700 mini microbreweries today. And a lot of that has come because there's so many home brewers and the standard of home brewing is very high, and that's happened because of how strict the alcohol laws have been in times gone by. So yeah, definitely cool to find my first dedicated Belgian brewery actually. This one should be really interesting. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I'll do in the future from Vreta Kloster Nanobryggeri. Very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you guys show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about the Vreta Kloster Nanobryggeri then, on to my brewery notes. So, as I've mentioned to you already, and as you can probably guess by the name, this one is a monastic brewery. So what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about the monastery first off, and then we'll talk about the actual brewery itself, because they're not wholly connected, if that makes sense. But as I mentioned to you already, this brewery is based in Ljungsbro, which is to the north of Linköping, kind of on the way up towards on the way up towards Stockholm, kind of off the eastern bank of Vättern, if I'm remembering the names of the two lakes rightly. I think it is Vättern that's the more eastern one. But the brewery itself takes its name from the nearby Vreta Kloster, or the Vreta Monastery as you would say in English, and this apparently is Sweden's oldest nunnery, having operated between the 12th century and at the 16th century. So the monastery itself was founded by King Inge the Elder and Queen Helena sometime around the year 1100. Some sources say 1101 is the foundation date of the monastery, but it's believed there was a brewery in the convent at one stage, and that's kind of why the owner of this new brewery decided to name it after the monastery actually, or one of the reasons I should say. But the convent was Benedictine until 1162, and then it changed to become Cistercian, and over the centuries several kings were actually buried in the church, and after the Reformation it was forbidden for them to take on any new novices, so they sort of transformed into a school for daughters of the nobility, as well as being a retirement home for noble women. But the last nun from the nunnery died in 1582, and these days the Vreta Abbey is actually part of the Church of Sweden, which is Lutheran. So yeah, there you go. But the Vreta Kloster Nanobryggeri in its current form was founded in October of 2019 by Andreas Fejes. So he'd been a home brewer for a couple of years before starting this, and he had a considerable interest in Belgian beers, notably Trappist beers of course. But outside of brewing, he's a researcher in adult education, and he's actually got his own consultancy company that does lots of different things involving adult education as well. But he started off with a brewery of 200 litres, and he's got a number of different fermentation tanks there as well, and the hope is that eventually, if this is successful, he can scale it up and actually have his own brewery and get his beers out there a little bit more. But other than that, there's not too much history to the brewery as of yet. But as of December 2020, these guys have produced 10 different beers so far, and they are all, you know, different styles of Belgian beer. They're not sour beers, because I think apparently Andreas is not so keen on the sour beers, which is a shame. It would be cool to see these guys do a Flanders Red actually. But yeah. Most of them tend to be, you know, the sort of blondes, doubles, tripels, quadrupels, the kind of more monastic style Belgian beers actually. But yeah, so far that's all I can really tell you about the Vreta Kloster Nanobryggeri for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, and it gives you a history like the one I've told you about the monastery. And you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. You will see another one from these guys incidentally in a little while, because I do have one of these in my December order. I think it's one of the quadrupels that I've got coming actually. But there you can see the artwork on this one. It is very, very nicely presented. The artist on this one is Louise Hevre, I should say, very close to the word for oat in Swedish, of course, havre. But it tells you a little bit about the beer on the side there as well, and you can see they do have their own bottle caps as well, which is pretty cool. But it says on the side here, from Vreta Kloster Nanobryggeri comes this beer in the Belgian dark style, fruity, malty, and lightly bitter. Then the beer is it's brewed traditionally with efterjäser. I guess that'll be like secondary fermentation in the bottle, and this can make some yeast sedimentation happen in this. So it's dark, sweet, and let it stand. Serve serve at a temperature between 8 and 10 degrees Celsius. So yeah, and it says on the side here as well, the brewery can be found in the vicinity of Sweden's oldest nun monastery, with the same name as the thing, Vreta Kloster. The monastery was active from 1100s until the end of the 1500s. This beer is brewed for your own consumption. And they brewed their own beer for their own consumption, sorry, misread that. But yeah, getting better at these Swedish translations actually. I used to be quite slow with them, but my Swedish is of course improving at the moment. But as you can see, 330ml bottle this one. I honestly can't remember what I paid for this beer actually, but yeah, it wasn't madly expensive. I think it was maybe about 40, about 40 Swedish crowns, something like that. Maybe a little bit cheaper, come to think of it. But yeah, 8.8% ABV this one, and some kind of Belgian dark strong ale. So we'll keep an eye on this one with the sediment, because they did say on the bottle to watch out with that. But let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting. An 8.8% Belgian dark strong ale, and is it going to behave? Yes, it is. You always have to watch with these Belgian style beers, because they can go a little bit mental when you take them out of the bottle. But yeah, let's get this guy out. See what we've got. You always have to be careful on the pour as well, so you don't get a massive head out of them. One of the things with bottle conditioning, but that is traditional of course in Belgium, quite often what they do is they add candy sugar to the beers and then just let them ferment. That's one of the things that they often do with the tripels, quadrupels and things like that. Yeah, there is quite a wee bit of sediment on the bottom of that. I'm not sure. It's quite thick. It is. It's not too thick actually, come to think of it, but yeah, there is definitely a little bit of sedimentation visible in the bottom of that glass there. But yeah, it certainly looks pretty damn nice, I have to say. It does just look like a quadrupel or something like that. So yeah, came out of the bottle quite nicely. So if we shine the light through this beer, I would say that this one is probably a kind of chestnut stained mahogany type colour. I think that's a fair way to describe this one. There's a solid half finger of a frothy, I would say, medium beige head on this one. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, quite a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there, but overall it does look pretty nice. And there is a degree of haze to this one, which is kind of what you would expect from from Belgian beer, basically. Brain fart there. But yeah, it certainly does look the part. If we compare this to the Belgian styles that we know already, it does look like a Bruin or a Dubel or a Quadrupel. It's kind of along that region. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, quite a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. And in fairness, you would expect this beer to be a little bit more active in terms of its carbonation, because you just get that from the Belgian beers because of the bottle fermentation. So yeah, it certainly looks the part for a Bruin or a Dubel or something like that. And you know, when it's cut, and it's at 8.8%, it's actually getting quite close to the Tripel sort of alcohol content actually. So yeah, this one I'm sure will be quite interesting. So let's have a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we get on with this one. I'm very, very curious about this beer, as I said. Oh yeah. So with this beer, I'm going to say straight away, this gives you, you know, if you think about the likes of the Castile Donker, you know, beers like this, it does have a lot of, it's got a good, it's like it comes across in the aroma as like quite a strong Dubel. I don't think it's quite sweet enough. I don't think it's quite sweet enough and big and fruity enough to be a Quadrupel, to be honest with you. It does come across as like a slightly stronger Dubel, sorry. You can feel in the aroma that this beer is a little bit more boozy. You can pick that up with just with the level of kind of sweetness that you get from the brown sugars and the thickness of the bread, but it doesn't quite come across as a Quadrupel in my mind. But I will say it smells very, very authentic, and that's what you want. So yeah, let's break down the aroma of this one then. So straight away with this beer, you're obviously going to notice the yeast. Belgian beer for me is very, very yeast focused. So you've got that lovely kind of brown bready backbone to this one. It's kind of wholemealy bread. It's almost got a little bit of the sweetness you would expect of like a rye bread or something like that. You've obviously got a good bit of that doughy, yeasty kind of thing in there as well. There is a wee bit of that. You do get a wee bit of that sort of banana and clovey thing coming out of this one that you always get with these Belgian beers as well. But the brown sugars are very interesting in this one for me. They do come across. It's got like a very sweet, very bright caramel note to it, like a salted caramel almost. Yeah, it does really remind me of, like, you know, salted caramel chocolate and things like that. It actually reminds me a little bit of the Marabou Havre Salt almost. It's kind of like that. So yeah, you've got quite a bright caramel note out of this one, a little bit salted. You do get a wee bit of that McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing out of this beer as well. But yeah, I would say that the overall leaning of this beer really is more kind of brown sugary and things like that. So yeah, we'll see. Yeah, this one I think is going to be quite a bright and quite tasty beer actually. It comes across very, very sweet on the kind of malty, yeasty side of things. So yeah, lovely kind of wholemealy brown bread sort of thing. Lovely wholemealy brown bready sort of thing. You've got a nice little bit of a kind of sweet biscuity note and a little bit of caramel in there. It's kind of got everything you would want. As I say, it smells a little bit brighter and sweeter than a Dubel in a lot of ways, but the level of brown breadiness that you get out of this makes it just smell a little bit boozier in some ways as well. And there is just a wee bit of that banana and clovey sort of thing that you usually expect from Belgian yeasts as well. So really interesting in that regard. On the hoppy side of things, it is kind of what you'd expect as well. I'm starting to notice a wee bit of the phenol out of this one. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, there is a wee touch of earthiness to this one, a little bit of a herbal quality as well. Some kind of florally notes, but not overly much. It is quite herbal and earthy in a sense, and you've got, pardon me, a nice little bit of lighter note to this one as well. I'd be very curious to know exactly what hops they're using in this one. I mean, would they be using Belgian hops? Belgian hops, of course, are like a cross between English and German. They've got a little bit of the herbal and earthy sort of thing that you would expect of the English hops, but at the same time the grassiness is a little bit brighter. like the German ones, and the overall feel of them is a little bit smoother, like the German hops as well. There's something in my head that tells me this could be a bit of Bramling's Cross. There is something that makes me wonder if it is Bramling's Cross from England that's in this. But one of the things that they often do with Belgian beers as well is I think they use slightly older hops in these beers. I know they do that with the sour beers like the Flanders Reds, so that the bitterness of the beer doesn't take away from the sourness. So I do wonder if that's something that they employ with things like this, like, you know, the Belgian strong darks and stuff like that. The Belgian beers are not overly bitter, they are more yeast focused, as I've said before. But yeah, the hoppy side of this beer, I think, is quite nice. But yeah, fruity side of this beer is very nice as well. So let's focus on that. So you do get a little bit of that kind of phenolic-y sort of thing out of this one, that kind of medicinal cough syrup type thing. It has a wee bit of that almost cakey quality to it as well, like a kind of Christmas pudding sort of thing. So you've got a bit of date, you've got a bit of prune coming out of this one, sultanas definitely. Yeah, there's a wee bit of a... It has a wee bit of a kind of spiciness to the fruit as well, kind of thing. Almost like, yeah, it's really interesting that actually. It is a little bit like a Christmas pudding, as I said. The floral, you do get a bit more floral quality out of this beer again the further that you go into it. But yeah, as I say, datey, pruny, a little bit of a figgy note, a wee bit. You do get a bit of that kind of juicier, oily blackberry note coming out of this one as well. Yeah, and I do like how all of that goes together as well. I mean, the fruity side of this one is quite nice, but as I say, you do get a little bit of that phenolic, that kind of Cavonia cough syrupy type thing underneath it as well. But you do expect that from like Dubels, and not so much from the Quadrupel, but yeah, from the Dubels you would expect that a little bit actually. This, you know, things like that are they kind of make me want to do these beer sommelier courses and get into the proper chemistry of the beer. My chemistry background as well makes me very curious about that. But yeah, the aroma that comes out of this one is very nice, and the beer overall does smell very authentic. And when you're talking about Belgian style beers brewed outside of Belgium, this is exactly what you want. So yeah, it certainly smells very nice, lovely and bright and brown sugary, this one, and a lot of other interesting components to this one too. So take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But we're going to taste this one now and see how we get on. So this one is the St Helena, an 8.8% dark strong Belgian ale, or Belgian dark strong ale, whatever you want to say, from the Vreta Kloster Nanobryggeri in Ljungsbro, just to the north of Linköping, kind of a third of the way up Sweden. Let's get stuck into this one. Slanja, skål. Oh yeah, that is pretty solid actually. That's nice. That is a nice beer, this. It's one of these ones, you know, you can, you know, if you tasted this blind, you can tell straight away that it is Belgian. It's one of these ones that's quite difficult to really fit into any of the usual categories. So perhaps the Untappd, thing where it just says, yeah, dark, strong Belgian ale. Probably that's a, you know, I think that's a fairly solid description for this one actually. I think this one is. I think that is really, really nice, to be honest with you. This is solid actually. I mean, I can see why he was saying, why in the article it was saying that he'd got praise for his beers, because it does come across as very, very authentic. Like I say, it's difficult to put it in any one category with the Belgian beers, but to be honest, that's not so important. The question is whether it's a good beer, and I think it is. So thumbs up to Andreas and the Vreta Kloster Nanobryggeri. I'll be keeping an eye on these guys and see if I can try a Belgian blonde and a triple and a quadruple. Those are probably my three favourite, more non-sour Belgian beers, I guess we could say. Those are probably the three ones that I would always go for. I just got this one I just picked up because I didn't recognise the name of the brewery, and I thought, well, it sounds it's a Belgian style beer, this could be quite interesting. Turns out it is. As I say, you can find some real gems amongst the small breweries in Sweden. Yeah. So, where to start with this one then? I like this. It actually comes across kind of similar to what you would expect from the aroma, to be quite honest with you. So let's just break it down. Straight away in the middle of the palate you can feel the sort of yeasty components of the beer. You've got that lovely kind of brown bready doughy thing just forming the backbone of the beer in the middle third of your palate and in the back third of your palate. As you go further into the aftertaste, you will notice some of the more kind of banana and sort of clovey flavours coming out, especially on that middle third of your palate. If you go to the front corners of your tongue too and just move diagonally back, you will notice there are one or two little woody and almost slightly nutty qualities coming out of this beer as well, which is quite interesting. But those are quite minimal. I would say the woody and nutty sort of undertones that the beer has are quite minimal. This is generally quite a bright Belgian beer in my mind. But yeah, this is it's almost a shame that this guy is only brewing like 200 litres at a time, because the beers are very, very good. The one thing I would say as well about them that I do like, and I've said this about a few breweries such as Mooley's in Örebro and things, or Eskilstuna. I always mix those two cities up, actually. I always do that. But yeah, I mean, the one thing I like about this beer as well is the yeastiness and stuff that you get out of this. It does come across as being not madly refined in some ways, and I think, generally speaking, Belgian beers are like that, and that's one of the things that I like about the Belgian beers, is that they don't come across as if they've been purified and refined and things like that. But I guess that is the thing with the beers being yeast forward as well, and you can tell in a way that this beer is brewed on the kind of small scale, and I like that about it. I really like doing reviews like this where you're reviewing things from small batches. So as I say, this one gets a thumbs up for me. I do wonder if he's got his own bottling machine and stuff like that, because I can imagine if he's doing 200 litres, bottling about 600 bottles, that's quite a task actually to do by hand, especially labelling them and things. So I would be curious to know about that. But yeah, the beer is really nice and authentic, and the base of the beer, which is the yeasty side of things, that's the most important part to get right when it comes to brewing the Belgian style beers. He's got that, so there's definitely a very solid foundation for this brewery going forward. It's got my approval, at least. One of my favourite breweries that I always liked back home in Scotland was 6 Degrees North, Belgian style brewery based in sort of Stonehaven, although I think they brew in Lawrence Kirk. In the kind of northeast of Scotland, actually. So you find yourself in Scotland, 6 Degrees North are a very good brewery to check out. They brew stuff like this as well, actually. Although in fairness, I think 6 Degrees North stick to like saisons and the more blonde styles of Belgian beer. But yeah, nice stuff anyway. But yeah. If you go towards the back third of your palate, you can feel that the breadiness and the doughiness just thickens up a wee bit. You do get a bit of a thicker note out of this one. It's almost a little bit wheaty in a sense. I think this beer actually, it does have wheat in it. It's in the side here, it does have a wee bit of wheat in it, so that makes sense. But yeah, on the back third of the palate, you do get a wee tiny touch of that wheaty bitiness out of it. But yeah, as you move further forward on that back third of the palate, you can feel it's really nice and smooth. Then you've got that gap between, or that borderline between the middle third of your palate and the back third of your palate, and then the thickness of the beer just drops away a little bit, it just goes down a wee bit. Then on top of the kind of breadiness that you have in this one, you start to get the brown sugars. So in the very centre of that middle third of your palate, you've got a really nice, quite thick, sweet caramelly note to this one. And as I say, the caramel for me in this beer is very, very bright actually. Quite often with beers like this, they will add a candy sugar to them, like a rock candy sugar, and that, I'm pretty sure, going by the flavour in this, that's what they've done here. So you really get quite a bit of that out of this beer, and it gives the beer a real bright, just like a straight up kind of brown sugary brightness. And as you move further out from the very centre of your palate towards the edge, you start to get a few sort of biscuity, McVitie's digestive kind of notes there, but it is a very bright brown sugary note that you get out of this one for sure. It's not such an oily caramel or anything like that. There's a wee bit of oily caramel in the middle of the palate which covers the booziness of the beer, but yeah, mainly it's quite a bright kind of brown sugar. It's almost like if you suck a sugar cube. My gran always used to give me sugar cubes when I was younger to suck on, which annoyed my mum, but yeah, my gran was born in 1921, so change days. But yeah, it tastes like if you suck on the brown sugar cube actually. That's what it really. That's what the sugar, the brown sugary components in this beer taste like actually. Yeah. Neighbour's dog's going crazy again. Always makes me smile. They're quiet otherwise, unless someone comes in and out. That's their job. But yeah, the brown sugary notes in this are very nice. So what I have to say is we've covered the sort of yeasty backbone of the beer, and for me that's always the key thing with Belgian style beers. And I have to say that this is absolutely solid. This is a solid foundation, and you know, as more and more beers are brewed at this brewery, it's only going to get better and better. So quite a bright future ahead of these guys, I would say. And there is, in fairness, I would say there is a gap in the market in Sweden for a Belgian brewery that's a Belgian style brewery that's brewing the kind of monastic Trappist type beers actually. So that's interesting. Although I very much doubt. I don't know if there are any monasteries or whatever still running properly in Sweden. I think it is all just Church of Sweden these days. I'm not into religion, of course, so not the best one to ask about these things. But yeah, it'd be interesting if there was a Swedish or a Nordic Trappist brewery opened up, but the beer, these guys' beer is certainly good enough to fill that void anyway. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, you get a wee touch of herbal quality out of this one, and the herbal quality, in fairness, actually does spread a little bit further forward. As you reach the front corners of the palate, it does have a little touch of a floral aromaticity. I'm thinking English hops with this beer, if not Belgian. I don't know what types, I don't know what varieties of hops they use in Belgium. I need to investigate that a little bit more at some stage. But then round the very front curve of the palate, you've got a little bit of a lighter kind of grassiness there, and then behind the front curve of the tongue, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer, the fruit from the hops. But I do think English hops in this one, probably Bramling's Cross. At a push it might be a bit of German Northern Brewer that's in this one. That wouldn't surprise me if it was there. I think the other one that's quite popular in these beers is like Styrian Goldings as well, if I remember rightly. They quite like to use these kind of noble type hops. So yeah, Styrian Goldings from Slovenia is another option. I think maybe Dana as well, if I remember rightly. But yeah, the fruity side of things is quite it is kind of similar to what we picked up in the aroma as well. So on that border between the middle third of your palate and the front third of your palate, you do have a nice bit of a kind of almost cakey type quality in this one. You do have, it really has a bit of that almost kind of Christmas puddingy vibe, and you can feel that just sitting under the whole fruity part of the beer. But if you go towards the back of that front third of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of a plummy note to it. But then you start to get the kind of dry dates and prunes and stuff like that, and as you move further forward, maybe there's a little touch of fig in there, but the fruits the fruits at the back of that front third of your palate are not overly sweet. They are a bit more kind of dry, if that makes sense. It's more like a dried fruity quality you get out of this one. But as you move further forward, you start to get a kind of sultana, almost slightly peary type quality out of the beer, and then on the very tip of the tongue you get a little bit of a blackcurranty, blackberry sort of thing there. So it's just interesting. The fruits in this beer are actually quite diverse in a sense. And I would say the fruits are a little bit kind of darker, if that makes sense, and a little bit more boozy. So there's a lot of interesting things to take away about this beer in the overall flavour composition of it. But I certainly like this one. I like how it goes together. So it does get a thumbs up from me, this. So well done to Vreta Kloster Nanobryggeri for this beer. I think that in terms of flavour profile, they've pulled it off really nicely. As I say, it's difficult to put this one into any particular category. It's not quite a double, it's not quite a quadruple. It's got properties of both. Maybe it's got a bit of the booziness of the quadruple, but albeit it's not at 8.8%. I think you really need to be about 10% to get into consideration for a quadruple, and a double for me is usually about 7. So it's a bit too boozy for that in a sense too, 7.5 maybe. So yeah, it's an interesting beer, this one, in a lot of ways, and it's good. That's the main thing. The question is it a good beer? Yes, it's nicely done. Does it taste authentically Belgian? Yes, it does. That's the main question. So yeah, curious. As I say, I'd be curious to talk to Andreas and see what style actually was intended with this. But I think the Untappd description of a dark, strong Belgian ale, that's probably fair for this one. I think I would stick with that. It does remind me a little bit of the Castile Donker in some ways. Yeah, like not quite a quadruple, not quite a double, just strong dark Belgian beer. Yeah. But in terms of the mouthfeel and stuff, then this one, and again, this is an interesting point. It feels, it's got everything that you would expect of a Belgian style beer in terms of mouthfeel, but you still get that Scandinavian, that Nordic cleanliness about the water. You really get that out of this beer, and it makes me smile, that, because it's just something you always notice with Nordic brewed beers. You always get a bit of that. You can just feel the quality of the water in these. Sorry about the edit there, guys. Memory card issues once again. Really is getting annoying with that, actually, these days. But yeah, as I was saying with this beer, the only thing that really gives this away is the cleanliness of the mouthfeel. I mean, the Nordic water is just of such a kind of good quality that the beers just feel a little bit kind of cleaner almost. That you can just taste a little bit of the mineral in the water there. But I mean, overall, I would describe this beer as being, you know, kind of top end of mid-bodied, I think. Yeah, top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied. Carbonation is very smooth. It's got a real slickness to it, this beer, as well, which is kind of what you'd expect, in fairness. You do get a wee bit of activity from the carbonation. That's as a result of the bottle fermentation, but I think you'd probably notice the effect more if you aged this beer a little bit, especially since they're quite a new brewery. You know, that's still something that a lot of breweries take a bit of time to find their feet with, but the carbonation is just at a nice level at this point. But in terms of hoppy bitterness, I think you'd be lucky to get 20 IBUs out of this one. It's not a heavy IBU beer, but then generally speaking, Belgian beer isn't. Malt base, yeasty kind of thing, very, very smooth in a lot of ways. Good bit of sweetness out of it, and you've also got a nice little bit of fruitiness out of this beer as well, but the fruits are a little bit darker and not quite as juicy and things as you might find in other beers, if you like. It's got the fruitiness, does give you a little bit of dryness the further you go into the aftertaste as well. So overall, I would say that it's quite a quirky beer in a lot of ways. So I really do like how all of this goes together in a sense. It's a really interesting beer, this one, and I think it's a very good thing that we've got a Belgian style brewery here in Sweden now. So I certainly look forward to trying a few more of their beers. I think I've got a quadruple coming in the order in December, or was it a triple? I really forget. But I'll have a look on the on Systembolaget and see what beers they actually do have available, because maybe I've missed some of their stuff at previous points. Previous releases through Systembolaget. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. A really nice Belgian strong dark ale, actually. It really fits that description quite well. Not quite a quadruple, not quite a double, somewhere in between, like a dark triple maybe, who knows. But yeah, really nice beer, this one, and I think the authenticity of this is good. So if you want some Belgian beers brewed in Sweden, Vreta Kloster Nanobryggeri are the ones that you want to go for, and you can get these nationwide through Systembolaget from what I understand. Sorry about that, guys. Once again, camera just being a pain. I don't know what's going on with that memory card, but we were just about to round off anyway. So yeah, thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Vreta Kloster Nanobryggeri as well. Do let me know if there are any other interesting examples of like quadruples, triples and doubles and stuff like that throughout Sweden, because there may well be. I know there's a lot of breweries here that I haven't reviewed anything from yet, so that would be interesting to hear as well. But yeah, do check out this brewery if you get the chance. They seem to have some really interesting beers, and I certainly look forward to trying more from them in the near future. And it's cool to have a dedicated Belgian style brewery here in Sweden, actually. So yeah, let's leave it at that. This one was the St Helena, an 8.8% Belgian strong dark ale, dark strong Belgian ale, whatever, from Vreta Kloster Nanobryggeri in Ljungsbro, just to the north of Linköping, on the way up to Stockholm here in Sweden. Thank you again for watching, and I will catch you guys very soon. Slange, skål, cheers, and I'll catch you on the next one.